Good evening. Right, something a little bit different tonight. Going to be making a wine beverage. I hesitate to call it a proper wine because wine's made from pressed grapes. This is made from stuff you can buy in the supermarket. What we've got is 1 litre of 100% pure grape juice, a bottle of Polish syrup, raspberry and lemon flavour, some sugar, some yeast nutrient, some yeast and some pectolase. Also got a 5 litre water container which we're going to do it all in. Okay, so to make a drink like this we basically need some sugar and some flavour. Now yeast is the most amazing organism ever. It eats sugar, pees alcohol and farts carbon dioxide. So it needs to be fed. Now for a 5 litre batch of wine like this, the magic number is 1100 grams of sugar. That will produce a drink with a alcohol content of around about 9.5 to 10%. Now that's not a lot, and you might be tempted to say, well, I'll put more sugar in and we'll get more alcohol. But the trouble is, there is a fine line between flavour and alcohol. These wines by their very nature are lacking in flavour and more specifically lacking in body. So if you try to up the alcohol content, it's just going to taste awful. Sherry, port, fortified wines like that, they can take 16% alcohol because there is so much body to them. A wine like this, there won't be. Don't waste your time, just enjoy it as a nice, light, refreshing, low alcohol wine. So like I said, 110 grams of sugar is the number we're looking for. So it's a question of checking how much sugar is in each of these. This 1 litre of grape juice has 165 grams. The syrup has 77 grams per 100 ml. So this bottle is 308 grams of sugar. Wow. Don't give it to your children. So, according to the calculation, we need about 630 grams of sugar. So I sterilised the water container. I used baby bottle steriliser. You can use the proper wine sterilising stuff, but it's a lot more expensive. Or you can, if you're really pushed, use a tiny little bit of bleach. Needs to be rinsed out well though, and that's nice and clean. Now I like to put the 2 dry ingredients in first, simply because it's easier to swirl them around and mix them up once you put them in first. So we've got pectolase. Well, there it is, pectolase. Sorry about the light. Pectolase is an enzyme that dissolves pectin. Fruit and fruit juices has pectin in various amounts. It's the stuff that makes your jam set. But you don't want it in a wine because it can cause a haze and stop it from clearing. This dissolves the pectin so you don't have that problem. I'm going to put a teaspoonful in, and then I'm going to put in a teaspoon of yeast nutrient. This should give them all the essential vitamins and stuff they need for healthy yeast, so we get a good fermentation. Next to go in is the grape juice. This is red grape juice, you can use white, doesn't really matter. But one thing to remember, just because it's red grape juice, it's not going to produce red wine. This grape is completely the wrong variety. It's got nothing to do with winemaking, but it does impart some of the grape flavour. Next up is the syrup. And what I do when I add some water, I'll rinse out both the grape juice carton and this bottle. Get every last drop out, because believe me, you need it. Next to go in is the sugar solution. There's a little bit of sugar left in there, but we've got to add some more water, so that will get washed down with that. Right, so I've rinsed out the bottles and topped the water container up. I haven't filled it right the way up. I've got about 4 litres in there at the moment. Going to leave it at that for now and then top it up after a few days once the initial fermentation has completed. So now it's time to give it a really good shake, get it all mixed up. Feeling it, it seems it's probably about the right temperature. You need it between 20 and 25 degrees centigrade for a good fermentation. That feels just about right, using that 1 jug of hot water and the other ingredients cold. So it's time to pitch the yeast. Now I've got a sachet of yeast here, all-purpose red yeast. Now I've been using this for several batches. I find that I can comfortably get 4 batches out of 1 packet. I think there's 1 left in there. So that can go in. And I'll just give it a very gentle swirl around to make sure the yeast is in there and mixed in. That's it. I'll see how it goes for a couple of days. Once the initial fermentation has calmed down, I'll top it up to the neck and leave it for 2 weeks, and hopefully it'll do its stuff. Now I don't bother with any fancy bubbly airlocks or anything. I find these caps are really good. If you just open them slightly, they serve as a perfectly good airlock. The theory is that this is going to fill up with carbon dioxide anyway, and with a constant movement of gas coming out, it's very unlikely that anything's going to get in. I've certainly never had any problems anyway. Right, so this has been bubbling away now for 2 weeks. Fermentation has now stopped. There's no more bubbles rising. I also checked it with a hydrometer, and yeah, that's ready to go. So the next step is to stop fermentation by killing off the yeast. Do this with some fermentation stopper. Sodium metasulfate, I think, is the ingredient. Now you can put this straight in there, but what I tend to do is to put it into a clean container and then mix a little bit of this, half a teaspoonful, with some warm water, and then add it to the mix. Right, so a lot of people tell you have to siphon this. That's not actually true. I never bother to siphon anything, I just pour it. I find if you're careful, you pour it slowly, you don't actually get a huge amount of sediment transferred over. And because these bottles have got these ribs on, if you pour it nice and slowly, it tends to trap a lot of the sediment as you pour. It's certainly a lot easier than siphoning, especially in a boat. So there we are, that's just poured off, not siphoned. As you can see, there's still a lot of sediment left in there, so I think that's just as good as siphoning. So I'm going to mix up some fermentation stopper in a bit of warm water and then add that to the mix. Half a teaspoon should do for a 5 litre container, and it just dissolves a little bit better if you add some warm water, although you can just put it straight in the jar. Don't inhale the fumes because they're not very nice. Going to give it a good mix. And the next step is to degas it. Now this is very important because while there's gas still suspended in the wine, it won't clear, and you can also taste it. It's like a metallic-y, slightly acidy taste, and that is very, very small micro bubbles of carbon dioxide in the wine. So there's many different ways to degas the wine. I find the easiest way is just to shake it. Shake it, release the top, tighten the top again and shake it. Okay, 2 weeks on after degassing, it's been sitting out in the engine room and he's looking rather nice and clear. So it's time to bottle it. I don't bother with glass bottles, I just use these plastic bottles that you get flavoured water in Tesco's. They're perfectly good enough for this. It's not as if I'm going to lay this wine up for months and months and months to make it let it mature. It really is a case of bottle it, leave it a week, and then it's ready for drinking. So yep, on to bottling. So there you have it, 4.5 litres of a very nice light rosé. So all it remains for me to do is to wish you a very happy Christmas, and I shall do some more videos next year. Cheers. Not bad at all.